It is early morning and I cycle towards the famous trestles. I wonder whether 12 years ago in 2003, when the whole Myra-Canyon was engulfed in flames, Jute Lake looked like today. However, at that time the forest fires were not 150 kilometers, but only 25 kilometers away. And even nowadays you can see the effects clearly. Thousands of blackened stumps still cover the landscape. Together with the clouds of smoke drifting in from Washington State, they produce a bleak picture. And the Okanogan Lake, 900 meters below, is all but invisible. After about 20 kilometers, I reached the Belvue Trestle. It is one of the few trestles that survived the Great Fire of 2003 undamaged, because it is more than 5 kilometers south of Myra-Canyon. It is rarely visited by tourists. The starting point of the fun and day trip cyclists is located nearer to Myra-Canyon. Here I experienced the bike path in full motion for the very first time during my trip. It cannot be compared with the Danube bike path in summertime, but anyway, it's a small crowd. The former railway line through Myra-Canyon is about 10 kilometers long and crosses 18 trestles and 2 tunnels. Nowadays, it is the foremost attraction of the Kettle Valley cycle path. When the Kettle Valley Railway was built, the wooden trestles were considered a very cost-efficient solution. But there was a drawback. The bridges had to be completely renewed every 15 years. The last train through Myra-Canyon did run in 1972. As the possibility loomed that the whole line would fall into ruins, the Myra-Canyon Trestle Restoration Society was formed and acted decisively. With generous donations and many volunteers, the railway line was transformed into a bicycle path. In 2002, it was declared a National Historic Site. A year later, in summer 2003, disaster struck. Devastating forest fires covered the whole Myra-Canyon, and nearly all trestles went up in flames. With tremendous energy, the bridges were rebuilt, and in 2007, the bike path through the Myra-Canyon could be reopened. Once I leave the Myra-Canyon, all tourists disappear. They have taken their cars and shuttle buses back to Kelowna. 20 kilometers I cycle through complete solitude. Only on the last 4 kilometers, before McCulloch Lake, I acquire a loyal companion. The picnic area at the beautifully situated lake is a very pet-friendly place. In the dusk, I take a walk along the shore. The waves of smoke have become more dense and the landscape has a distinct Martian quality. The visibility conditions have not improved when I leave McCulloch Lake the next morning, but the bike path quality is much better than previously. Between the McCulloch Lake and Carmi, on an approximately 50-kilometer leg, there's really nothing except secluded landscape. Probably there are bears, but fortunately they stay out of my way. Because of the wads of smoke, I am spared encounters with the quads, which increasingly are damaging the bike path. Only once one of these nuisances crosses the path. The whole region from here to Christina Lake is called boundary country. Previously, there were a number of mines and mining settlements, but that is long past, and nowadays the sparsely populated region relies mainly on tourism. Kamai, which I reach after several hours, has no shops and close to no inhabitants, but it presents a large collection of dolls and stuffed animals. From Kamai, it is another 10 kilometers to Beaverdell, my destination today. Here, at least, there is a campsite, a general store, and a fancy takeaway with slight frontier touch. When I leave Beaverdell the next morning, not much has changed. The rusty haze still impedes the view, and the bike path continues endlessly through the forests. Although its quality is now better than in the west of the Okanagan, I'm not sure how far I will make it today, because the route passes through Westbridge, and in this area, even on the Canadian side, forest fires rage, and probably are still. Not much information is reaching me, out of control. I cycle for 20 kilometers and then reach a bridge over the West Kettle River, and soon afterwards I enter the Rhone Canyon. Here, the West Kettle River rushes through a narrow gorge before it joins the Kettle River near Westbridge, a further 15 kilometers down south. Soon after I leave the Rhone Canyon behind, I again pass some barriers where the road is blocked for short distances, for example because erosion carved large holes into it. With my bike, I have no difficulties to bypass these sections. I tend to think that the barriers are probably meant for the quads, which I do not begrudge them at all. At the legendary stop Cyclists Rest, adorned with a full replica of a key VR caboose, I sit down for a picnic to honor the name. Paul Lotard, who built and sustained the place, used to greet cyclists here for many years. He retired to a nursing home some time ago, but the rest area is in much better condition than that at Jute Lake. About 5 kilometers further on, I have another close encounter of the third kind. Suddenly, an emu appears in front of my bike and blocks my onward journey. Later, I learn that the bike path actually had been closed for all traffic, and the emu had belonged to a nearby ranch whose owner freed all the animals when the forest fires were moving ever closer. How massive the community of Westbridge had been affected, I see with my own eyes when I cycle through charred forests and white ash fields. When I travel through the area, the fires are mainly under control, but more than a dozen houses burned down to their foundations, and one can still see traces of desolation everywhere. Originally, my plan had been to camp near Westbridge, but the campground is a smoking desert, and I have no other choice than to cycle on, until I finally reach Midway. Midway is a village with just 500 inhabitants. Here, mile 0 of the Kettle Valley railway line is located. At Midway Station, still the most prominent building of the town, the Western Railway line, starting in Hope, ended. The Columbia and Western line continued further to the east. Today, the former railway station houses a museum, which illustrates the history of the Kettle Valley railway line. Midway is located very close to the US border. From the small airport, which is only 300 meters away from my campsite, helicopters constantly start to help fighting forest fires in Washington state. After inserting a rest day in Midway, I say temporary goodbye to the Kettle River, which continues on the other side of the border, and follow a small side river in a northeasterly direction. Continuing for about 15 kilometers, I reach Greenwood. The small village is, according to the Herald Miss Country Life magazine, one of the top 10 places to live in Canada. I treat myself to a chocolate-rich second breakfast in one of the kind-looking bakeries and then choose to defy the approaching storm and press on to Grand Forks. Because of the strong gusts of wind, the bike path seems too dangerous and I use the motorway. At first it goes uphill, but fortunately I go with the wind. The worst part of the storm, I sit out in an open area because I am afraid of falling branches. Fortunately, there is more wind than rain, and I weather the storm in pretty good shape. As a reward, I see a blue bit of sky for the first time after 1 week. In Grand Forks, the municipal campground is still closed, although the storm is actually over. But without any problems, I find a motel with attached campground. Except for the deer, I am the only visitor here. The distance from Grand Forks to Christina Lake is relatively short, less than 30 kilometers. The bike path runs on the banks of the Kettle River. The path is well developed and nearly gradient-free. After 20 kilometers, I reach one of the main attractions of this subsection, the Kettle River Trestle. Here, one crosses the river that is the namesake of the bike trail at a remarkable gorge. The name Kettle River probably stems from the large round holes which the river has repeatedly eroded into the rock bed of its banks. Shortly before Christina Lake, the Kettle River takes its leave and flows towards the US border and Washington state. There it joins, after about 30 kilometers, the Columbia River. Shortly after 12 o'clock, I reach Christina Lake, the community and tourist center named after the lake. This lake is one of the warmest in Canada. In the summer, the water temperature can reach 23 degrees. This brings a lot of tourists, and in summer, the banks of the lake are quite crowded. But not now, because there is already a distinct autumn mood. It is the end of August, which is late for the summer season here. And the forest fires in Washington state have discouraged many potential tourists. In Christina Lake, I put in a rest day. Unfortunately, I experienced 8 hours of continuous rain. As a small encouragement, the friendly campground manager brings me a warm dinner. She has German or Dutch roots, belonging to a local Mennonite parish. The clouds are still drifting low as I leave from Christina Lake the following morning. The cycle path on the eastern shore of the lake goes steadily up into the Rossland Range, which is a part of the Monashi Mountains. On my way to the Columbia River, I have to overcome almost 800 meters of altitude, but they are distributed evenly throughout the next 35 kilometers. One cannot prize highly enough the advantages of the railway track cycle routes. Despite the cloudy sky, this lake is without doubt one of the finest parts of the whole Kettle Valley cycle path. The views over the lake are fabulous, and the bike path is in very good condition. There are emergency shelters and picnic areas. I do not meet other travelers on the 80-kilometer trip to Castlegar. Only once a young bear moves hurriedly over the bike path 25 meters in front of me. He is, I believe, almost as scared as I. Approximately in the middle of the lake, I pass under Paulson Bridge and shortly afterwards come to the Rhone Explosion Memorial. It is a monument at the place of the first terrorist attack in Canada. Here, Peter Virgin, the religious leader of the Doukhobors, had been assassinated on a train trip in October 1924. The Doukhobors are a faction of the Russian Orthodox Church. They resemble in many respects the Hutterites or the Mennonites. Because of persecution, many of them immigrated to Canada in the late 19th century. For them, the construction of the Kettle Valley Railway line brought great economic benefits, but also conflicts, because they rejected state intervention strictly. Today, most of the faithful who still belong to this religious community live around Grand Forks and Castlegar. After I pass under Paulson Bridge, it goes downhill for the next 40 kilometers. During this part of the trip, I can enjoy not only the last two tunnels and the last two trestles of the Kettle Valley Railway bike path, but also great views over the Columbia River. Here it forms a 230 kilometers long lake, which is divided into Upper and Lower Arrow Lake. The lake terminates at a dam near Castlegar. After passing the Hugh Keenley Side Dam, where a lot of huge wooden rafts are stationed, only 19 kilometers remain to Castlegar. Here the Kettle Valley cycle path ends, but the TCT continues to trail and to the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. Castlegar, which boasts to be the best dam city, is a drawn-out small town with a very nice campground in a grove near the Columbia River. Castlegar boasts two interesting museums, which illustrate again the story of the Kettle Valley Railway line. One is located in the city, inside the former station. For the second museum, I have to switch over to the left bank of the Columbia River. Since the town stretches out over several kilometers, there are repeatedly wonderful views of the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, and often I am paddling through areas which do not look urban at all, and where now and then signs warn of prowling bears. Luckily, I do not encounter any. The Doukhobor Museum sits somewhat remote but very scenic. Before I reach it, I pass the tomb of Peter Virgin, which is located on a hill outside the town. It overlooks a suspension bridge crossing the Kootenay River. The old Brilliant Bridge was built by the Doukhobors in 1930, and today it is classified as a National Historic Site. The Doukhobor Museum covers an extensive area on the east bank of the Columbia River. At a central place stands a statue of Tolstoy. The famous writer funded the immigration of many Doukhobors to America. The museum is housed in several cottages, and there even is a live demonstration of traditional spinning and weaving techniques.
Because everyone's threaded on different ones of these by lifting different combinations.
After 3 relaxing days, I take the Greyhound bus back to Vancouver. It needs 10 hours for the trip that took me 3 weeks. In the evening at 9 o'clock, I'm back in Vancouver. As farewell tour, I cycle along the Stanley Park seawall. It is the only time during my Canadian tour that I do not only see many people, but also many cyclists. Vancouver shows me its bright side. It is a wonderful, warm, early autumn day. Sunny, but with a fresh breeze from the sea. Almost an invitation to reserve the remaining legs of the TCT through Western Canada for a future trip.